It has to be something external because he's righteous and pure and clean and a man of God, you know?
I like the bonus track on that Disney soundtrack by Cher, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. Hear from the people in the town. Do you know that song?
I don't know that song.
Gypsies, tramps, and thieves. Hear from the people in the town. They call us gypsies, tramps, and thieves. But every night the men will come around and lay the money down.
Ooh.
It's not a YouTube video if I'm not singing something really off kilter.
Nuance Ho.
Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Kara Burrell. Sometimes I go by Nuance Ho, and sometimes I have backwards cap, free will, and cool dudes named Kyle Bishop in my home studio. Hi, Kyle.
Always happy to be here.
Hey, so you guys will remember that Kyle has joined me on a couple of videos so far about shadow work and just unplugging from what your brain wants to tell you is truth, but is really BS. So Kyle's one of my favorite people. I love the way he thinks. So if you're on this channel, hopefully you're into kind of deconstructing from high demand religions. Maybe it's Mormonism, and maybe you want to understand shadow work a little bit better, because I would love to just like nut punch Joseph Smith all the time. I really would, but I'm holding it hostage until you guys do some inner work too. So that's what Kyle's here for. So Kyle, tell us what we're getting into today.
Okay, so last time we're going to talk about shadow work, and then ADHD happened, and we didn't even talk about it at all.
I edited out the ADHD, and it was just seamless.
Yeah, perfect. So basically, last time, there's a lot of prerequisite honesty that has to be in place, which is really challenging to get to in order to make shadow work worth it, because it's something that really requires you to look at yourself in a very uncomfortable and honest light. And that's something that if you're not ready to be in that space, shadow work is not going to have very much to offer you. So it was important that we did that and that we established the radical honesty that you have to have in order to do it.
Right. So those videos, I would recommend going back and watching. I'll leave this link in the description. A good baseline, good foundation. And now we're going to get into the heavier stuff. So take us into what's a good example of what having a shadow looks like.
Okay, so the textbook best example of shadow work actually comes from Disney. It is Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and he is such an interesting character. And if you want to do a little bit of extra credit, you can go listen to the song on YouTube. It's called Hellfire, and it's from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And we're going to go a little bit through the lyrics because each line is like perfect, and it shows you what it takes to have a shadow and how it all works together. So we're going to start. So basically, background on this song, Frollo has realized that he is experiencing lust, and it's really throwing him for a loop because he views himself as a very upright, pure, morally virtuous person, as we're going to find out in the song. So it starts out with Beata Maria, which is like Holy Maria. You know I am a righteous man. Of my virtue I am justly proud. You know I'm so much purer than the common, vulgar, weak, licentious crowd. So he's totally just the man's man. He's friends with everybody. No judgment. Then tell me, Maria, why I see her dancing there, why her smoldering eyes still scorch my soul. So this is something that he views himself in a very particular way. And so when he has feelings and emotions that pop up that do not mesh well with how he views himself, he doesn't know what to do about it. I feel her, I see her, the sun caught in her raven hair is blazing in me out of all control. Esmeralda. Anyway, I'm getting hot over
Sexual
here.
awakening in Disney.
Woo! And then it takes a little bit of a turn, like fire, hellfire, this fire in my skin, this burning desire is turning me to sin. So first of all, obviously not a very healthy ideology about sexuality. Sin is something evil, it's dark, it's dirty, it's something that we just have to do to perpetuate the race.
It's like, but, I cannot be hanging on these bells if I'm hanging on these feels.
The image that just came into my mind when you said that was kinky. That was something else. Anyway, let's keep going. It's not my fault. I'm not to blame. It's this gypsy girl, the witch who set this flame. It's not my fault if in God's plan he made the devil so much stronger than a man. Of course, using the devil as a scapegoat. We've all been there.
It's Satan's enticing.
It wasn't me. He's just so powerful.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, so he's saying none of this is coming from me. These feelings of lust that don't mesh with the way that I view myself it couldn't possibly be from me. And so as a result, he turns to God to say, protect me. Protect me, Maria. Don't let the siren cast her spell. So again, Esmeralda is the one to blame for what he is feeling inside, and it's making him feel uncomfortable. And it couldn't possibly be emanating from within. It has to be something external because he's righteous and pure and clean and a man of God, you know?
I like the bonus track on that Disney soundtrack by Cher, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. Hear from the people in the tram. Do you know that song?
I don't know that song.
Gypsies, tramps, and thieves. We hear from the people in the town. They call us gypsies, tramps, and thieves. But every night the men will come around and lay the money down.
Ooh.
It's not a YouTube video if I'm not singing something really off kilter. Anyway.
That was pretty good. That was like, you really...
If I could tell, if I could find a way.
That was incredible. I love that.
To not have the ADHD get in the way.
Don't let the fire sear my flesh and bones. Destroy Esmeralda and let her taste the fires of hell, or else let her be mine and mine alone. Which is such a depraved, like, he interprets that as like a potential dating option when it's making him feel this way. She has to die or she has to be with me. It's like, and he doesn't see how messed up that is. Because the way that we tend not to just identify with certain ideologies and ideas, we tend to find one that really strokes our ego, and then we hyper identify with that. And that's like, if it's not that, we don't want it. And our brain is actively like doing a really damn good job of not letting those thoughts, you know, the things that we don't want to be, come to the surface, which is why self-awareness is a very challenging skill to develop, because again, it requires us to go against the way we are wired.
We want to stroke that ego. We want to say, I was AP on my mission. Why is the hottest girl in my singles ward not returning my calls? She's probably a tramp.
Exactly.
Is that where you're going with that?
Exactly.
It's like, maybe there's some other inner work you need to be doing there, elder.
Bingo. Lost my train of thought.
That's what you get when you come to work with me.
It's so nice to be able to relate with somebody on this, because brains and shit.
But every once in a while I do pull out a Cher impression.
And it was incredible. Like, I mean, we got Esmeralda, we have you singing, like, I'm only flesh and bone, Nuanto. Good God. And the song ends with hellfire, dark fire. Now, Gypsy, it's your turn. Choose me or your pyre. Be mine or you will burn. God have mercy on her. God have mercy on me. Again, always, God is this thing up there that's going to deliver you, which is really, really obviously not true. Case in point. But she will be mine or she will burn. So obviously a very depraved thought process that's going on. And what is so interesting about this is that to anybody watching the film, even children, they can look at this guy and look at what he's doing and be like, there's something so wrong with you. And Frollo cannot see it. And it's weird that you'd think something so obvious to other people would be obvious to that person. And it's really not. Because often it's not that I mean, obviously they don't want to see that part of themselves, but because they are so hyper identified with the person that they need to be in order to get love, in order to get approval, exception, the pay raise at work, you know, whatever it is. We want those things so badly that we're willing, like our brain doesn't want us to look like something that wouldn't be the person who gets that. And so this very false symbol of who we are is kind of how we play, because that's how we play the game to win whatever cultural game we're playing. Like if you were born in Catholicism, you have to play by the Catholic rules. If you're born in Mormonism, if you're born, you know, whatever, there are a lot of different things that you have to do in order to get love. And this spans definitely outside the religious realm as well. So for example, if you have a child who is very creative at heart, now, if that child is born to a couple of very pragmatic parents, they're often going to look at his creativity as this little fun, quirky phase that they wish he would let go of and get on his way to being a lawyer or a doctor.
Yeah.
You know, and so they look at that as this temporary hobby when really that is an intrinsic core trait of who that person is. Now, what happens to that child when he's put into this kind of a situation? Well, he slowly and unconsciously, and that's the big thing, he doesn't realize it, he starts distancing himself from his own creativity. He pushes that away into what is the shadow. And in the shadow, that's where we find all of the traits that we have unknowingly repressed, because when we've tried, you know, being that person or displayed that trait, it was met with hostility, resentment, or it just wasn't valued. And so you thought, you thought subconsciously that maybe I'll get rid of that. And it's not something we're super aware of that we actually do. And so it opens this whole new, like, who am I really though? Because we've been playing this role for so long.
Yeah, it's kind of that idea about death of 1,000 paper cuts, or just
Yeah.
like with small directions with a child or whatever, over time, those can all compound into a whole different person,
Yeah.
just depending on the conditions and like the guardrails that were set up, nudging
Yeah.
them in those directions.
One of my favorite things to do while coaching is there are people who find a part of themselves that they didn't realize they had repressed, because that's what shadow work is. It's
Right.
kind of sticking your hand into this bag of tangled up cords and pulling something out, and you don't necessarily know what it is when you start shadow work that you're going to find in your shadow. But when you find that trait, it's almost like you remember this long lost friend that just kind of fizzled away and you forgot about. And so I see people who are like, oh my gosh, like I actually am a very sexual person. That's something that like comes up a lot of time, because religious people and sexuality, you are programmed with a lot of baggage about sexuality, what it has to mean, what you have to do, what you cannot do, all the rules and regulations around it. And so it's this thing that should just be free and organic and flowing, but because of all the shame and the guilt that exists around sexuality, which is so unfortunate, people don't really embrace that side of themselves. And so a lot of people just think, yeah, I'm just not a sexual person. And it's like, oh boy, like there's a lot to explore there for a person, but you have to get them to go toward that thing, their own sexuality that they have been spending their entire life trying to, distance themselves from, because sex is wrong and it's dirty and it's all these things. And so when, I'm like, hey, like, explore this. You have these feelings, you've brought them up. Maybe that's something you could explore. And it's often met with like, nope, like we can do coaching. We can, I can go to therapists, but we do not go there. I'm like, that is exactly where you need to go. And shadow work, one of my favorite quotes about shadow work is that the thing you most need to be conscious of is the thing you least want to be conscious of. The thing you most need to be find will be found in the place you least want to look. I was like, ooh, because if it doesn't hurt, you're not really doing shadow work, because you don't realize it, but you've built up all these aversions that were programmed into you against certain parts of yourself. So inside of you, you have all these civil wars going on. It's like you're driving a car, but these parts of you that repress become their own person, and then they have a steering wheel in your car. So it's a car driven by a whole bunch of steering wheels. It's hard to move, in one direction, because you have all these shadow fragments inside of you that, the creative, like, let's take the creative boy again, for example. He's like, no, I want to be creative. This isn't a hobby. This is like who I am. And he's repressed that trait. And so the inner creative, child that's still very much there and wants to be reintegrated and acknowledged and appreciated, he starts to scream, because it's like you just take these traits and you shut them in a room. You lock the door, and after a while, it just bangs on the door because it wants to be there. And, by all rights, what's wrong with being creative? What is wrong with having a good sex life or being able to explore yourself in that way? And obviously, this shadow work goes into every aspect of who you are, not just sexuality, not just, are you creative, but all these different parts of you that you realize, like, slowly, these little things that bother you throughout the day, or these thoughts that come into your mind that are like little flags that are like saying, hey, it's kind of like the muffled cries of your shadow fragment that's down there being like, hey, reintegrate me. Like, I know you like me.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm beautiful and I'm good. And like, I would add so much to your life if you would let me out. But it's like, no, I can't do that, because I learned long ago that if I let you out, I get in trouble. I get judged. I get all these things. And so your ego, which has, the vested interest in you not experiencing pain, right?
Yep.
And we've talked about the pain pleasure ratio, where it's like 1 unit of pain is not equal to 1 unit of pleasure. So the brain would much rather give up like 5 units of deriving pleasure if it can avoid 1 pain. And there's really interesting quotes about this. So Dave Matthews has one, and he talks about how if I went to a show and 60,000 people said it absolutely rocked, and I walk down the street and I hear one person say it sucked, that's what I'll hear. And Larry King actually has one too. And he talked about how I've always wondered, I'm going to pull it up.
I'll use this opportunity. Now that we are non-religious and we cannot turn to the scriptures for inspiration and triumph from the Lord's prophets, I'll do the next best thing and look for triumphs in my Lord and Savior, Lauryn Hill, as she played Rita in Sister Act 2. Because yes, it is difficult to make a living doing creative things, and your parents are just worried about you paying the bills. And in the words of Rita's mother in Sister Act 2, singing does not pay the bills. But Mom, I can really sing. And so could your father. And he was toe tapping until the son came home, and now he's dead. I think that was the quote. But you know what? Rita, she turned in her permission slip and she went and she saved the day. Sister Act 2 is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Okay, I'll have to watch it.
It's literally the greatest. Are you down with G.O.D., by the way?
I'm down with D.O.G.
You down with G.O.D.? Do you like how they changed the lyrics and that to be Christian instead of "Are you down with other people's pussy"? Are you down with OPP? Yeah, you know me. They go, "Are you down with G.O.D.? Yeah, you know me." Who's down with G.O.D.? Everybody.
Oh, Christianity ruining good literature and music since
when Lauryn Hill does it, it's all the past.
There's two quotes that do a really good job of portraying how this actually manifests. So one of them is from Larry King. He says, "I've discovered over the years that good reviews strangely fail to make the author feel as good as bad reviews make him feel bad." It's because of the way that we're wired.
Yeah.
And another example, if 60,000 people tell me that they loved a show, then one walks past and says it sucked, that's the comment I'll hear. And so it's really interesting because
every day of my life. Yeah. So you just walked into, I just read like the most vicious message I've ever gotten in my entire life. And normally they don't throw me for a loop. But that one did. I get lots of nice messages, but man, one really nasty one is like,
yeah. First of all, very sorry about men and all that entails. I'm just gonna broad sorry about men.
Can you talk to the men?
So I'll talk to the men.
On behalf of the men, could you talk to
God
them?
damn it, men.
They'll know that you are the leader by your hat.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a dude. This is a bro.
This is flat brim, okay? This is like the pinnacle hat that you can have if you're a bro.
When you are in a space where you get lots of compliments and your brain's just like, that's kind of the water you're swimming in. But you're open, if you open yourself up to just even receive feedback about the art that you're producing or whatever you're producing.
Yeah.
And then the water you're swimming in is just people like it. And that's just the language that you speak. And then one really negative thing hurts more than 10,000 thumbs ups.
Yeah. And it's weird because this is one of my beefs with people who are like, we came about by intelligent design. I'm like, how is that intelligent? And why is it that God wired us for, indulging in what we emotionally want to be true, which God knowing that would be any person who is, indoctrinated with Islam, that Allah is the God to follow. And there's such a strong emotional connection there. And it's like, why would God have made it that way? That we would have valued our emotional indulging over the pursuit of truth? Because he's the one who wrote the code for all this shit, like everything, which I also have a little bit of beef with him. Like, why did you code into, the matrix, into our world, a worm that's entire life cycle is to burrow through the eye of a children, eating its way through in Africa? Like, we really could have done without that, Lord. Like, that would have been so fucking cool.
Maybe
had
he
you
was
not
Muslim.
Put that in there. Oh, fuck. See, there it is. Islam. It's the winner. Well, that's a shame for you. You got to cover this shit up, girl. Burqa it up.
Yeah. And you can go on wearing whatever hat you feel like.
Yeah. Oh. Anyway, getting back to why it's so challenging to do shadow work. I mean, why it's so hard to see what's in your shadow and other people. Can you just be like, yeah, it's this. Like it's as easy for you to look at Frollo's character and point out what's wrong with him as it is for other people to point out at you. But that's not a comfortable thing. Your brain with its, pain-pleasure ratio, it doesn't want to admit that you don't see things clearly and you don't even see yourself clearly, because that seems wild. Because who else has immediate and direct access to your thoughts?
Probably me.
It would be you. But the thing is, your subconscious is running the show, and that's something by definition is beneath and out of your conscious reach.
By definition.
Yeah. Which it's interesting because that's why you have atheists who consciously say, I do not believe in hell. And yet when they're talking to me in a coaching session, it's like, I'm so afraid of burning in hell. So you may consciously say, I don't believe in the church anymore, but your subconscious programming that has been absorbing those messages years and years and years says, oh, yes, you do. And so shadow work is one of the tools that you can do to dive into what is still going on in there. Because one of the things that You'd think that people who are fresh out of a religion are the ones who are like, hey, I need a coaching session. Most of my people have been out and have been like, not even like involved in the church, and who are still realizing like, hey, like I've been out of the church for 40 years. I still have things that I'm realizing are still there. Can we talk? And I'm like, that's really interesting, because you don't know what you've repressed. You don't know what's still down there. And unless you kind of, you know, get that radical honesty and that bravery that is required to do shadow work, you'll never even open the door. You're afraid to even knock about what's behind, you know, there in the bottom of your subconscious. And sometimes it comes out when you do psychedelics.
Sure.
It's like, and that's a really weird thing. Like, because I'm somebody who is consciously so over the fear of hell and religion and just all the weird stuff. And from time to time on psychedelics and not, you'll have little thoughts and you realize, oh, that's interesting. Like, ooh, I didn't like that thought. Or, you know, like, oh, I'm past that. But like, why was it there? Why did it manifest itself? And it's just something to explore. It doesn't have to mean something massive, but there's never, you know, any, I'm not going to say there's never harm, because when you look at yourself, honestly, there is a lot of like trauma there. And it's scary to look at, and it can require you to change. So it's not like shadow work is different from other therapeutic methods, because it's not about, hey, you're so great, you are so awesome. It's like, no, like, let's get into your shit. Let's get into your darkness and reintegrate the parts of yourself that are broken and, you know, that have been made wrong. So it's kind of like you can win two ways with shadow work. One is that you find lost pieces of yourself that are beautiful. And then the other way is that you can become more okay with the parts of you that aren't okay.
Sure.
It's like let's say somebody's very greedy. So one of the things that you do in shadow work is you're trying to reintegrate these dark parts of yourself into you. And a lot of people say, well, why would you want to reintegrate greed into you? Well, let's look at what greed is. Greed at its foundation is simply an overdeveloped sense of self-preservation, which is a good thing. It's the part of you that sets boundaries. It's the part of you that says, I deserve to have my needs met, something that religion often beats out of people, especially women. And so they look at if there's like a trait that you really don't like in other people, that's a really good clue as to what's hiding in your shadow. So, for example, let's say that somebody grew up with a very overbearing father, and that father was just kind of an asshole. Now, any trait that even looks similar to asshole, or, you know, maybe it's assertiveness, maybe it's setting a boundary, being able to say no, that all seems to be kind of like the same. And so your brain says all of that is bad. And so, because you don't want to be an asshole, you don't be assertive, you don't set boundaries. And so you're just a giver. And narcissists love givers that have not developed the taker. They're the most delicious victim. You know, so I was coaching somebody who just got out of a narcissistic abusive relationship. And the reason why she stayed in it for so long is because she kept on saying, well, like, what could I do better? There's not a more delicious thing to hear if you are a narcissist for your victim to say. Like, and that's like, so it's interesting. But like, you try to get these women who have been so ingrained with, you are to give, you are nothing more than a fountain of joy of meeting other people's needs, and to get them to say, no, fuck this, I have needs that deserve to get met. That's really hard for them, when obviously you can look at that and say, well, isn't it obvious that everyone deserves like to not just be the slave to everybody else's needs, and that they should be able to have their own needs met, and like everyone else's happiness shouldn't be met at the expense of your own. Like, you don't have to light yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. Like,
love that quote. You
don't have to do that. But it's really hard because that indoctrination has been so deep, and stepping outside of that role is going to be met with like, hey, like, what's this new you going on? Like, are you reading your scriptures? Are you saying your prayers? Like, are you still spiritual? What's going on with you? You're stepping outside of the prescribed role that you're supposed to be playing. It's like,
yeah, and especially coming from a very conservative religion like Mormonism, you are going to step out. And I remember when I was Mormon with my sister, we used to make fun of how many people they'd leave the church, and whether they would go like, you know, be open and gay, or they would just be bisexual. And me and my sister used to make fun of that, of like, no way possible. If this was 100 years ago and there was no religion, like, there's no way that there'd be this many people exploring their sexuality or whatever. And I've come to understand that I'm like, no, it's just when you are into like shadow work and understanding and developing yourself and what your actual inclinations are, when you're freed from that structure, it's not anyone else's place to really judge and look at that, because they're just working through things that are core to like their personality that 100 years ago people just didn't have the space in society to be even able to explore. And it's not just like this big whole like conspiracy that Satan is just pulling all of these people into like the grips of homosexuality, or
Right.
like the grips of Satan doing all of these like non-Mormon activities and stuff. It's just people experimenting with who they are without the confines of other people, moving those things from the subconscious to the conscious and like letting them play in that field. And then how annoying is it that there's so many eyeballs on it looking to judge and cast doubts on it? So you have to be very secure in yourself to be able to like go in those spaces, exploring sexuality, exploring like what you're really all about without just these eyes and these judgments.
Yeah, and it's hard because asking somebody who's been through, the programming that religion puts into people to, just be okay with exploring all these things, like that's a lot more, it's easier said than done, right, for these people. And so that's why a lot of people like do find such value in coaching or in therapy or in just being able, whatever like method people take to explore themselves, even if it's not the best one, it's better than keeping all that stuff crammed down there and not exploring.
Yeah, I always like to use the analogy of just like your life being kind of like a set of Jenga pieces of different things, and then you take one apart and you're more just conscious, aware, instead of somebody building that tower for you in a church and telling you this is your tower, that you take that tower apart and you're like, okay, is this part of me who that church told me I was, or this gender role told me that I was? Like, take it apart, look at it from all sides, see what comes up for you, ground yourself and figure out what emotions are coming up for you. And you don't have to act on everything. You don't have to like say, oh, if this feeling is true, then that's coming up for me, this has to be true. It's just being in a space of openness and feeling like you don't have any judgment about whatever that feeling is, and be able to really authentically look at it and then decide if that's going to go back in your tower or not.
Yeah. Well, and to play off that analogy, that's actually a really good one, because it's like people will be willing to pull out a block here and there as long as it doesn't make the tower fall over.
Gotta let the tower fall over sometimes.
Yeah. No, and that's the scariest thing, because it's like I'll do little things, but like it can't come down. I'll read whatever gospel topic essay you send me, as long as it doesn't make me challenge my belief in the Mormon Church. So like it's kind of interesting. Nuance is also very much a pitfall, because it's a place where you can endlessly justify and do mental gymnastics until you're dead. Because it's like, I'll read all the arguments. I'll read I'll be open and read both sides, but I'm not, like, they've already, decided it's not going to change my view though. And it's like, well, then why are you researching? Why are you reading? It's like, and that's kind of getting back to shadow work. You have to have that honesty of like, when like reasonable people, when they realize that the evidence does not support their claim or their belief system, they change. That's what it means to be reasonable. And yes, it's very hard to do so. It's like we're very open about our ex-Mormon experiences and how awful it was, and it still took us so many years to do it. And so it's like, if we're the ones who are doing podcasts and I coach and we're doing all of these things, it's something that takes a little bit of time, but time is not the thing necessarily that fixes you or that brings you out. Right? You need time, but time is not the thing that's going to help you. It's what you do with that time. It's the radical honesty, the decision to, go into this and realize that, maybe if my Jenga tower falls over, maybe I was never supposed to be a fucking Jenga tower. Maybe I can build something else out of those blocks that is actually me, instead of just being another generic fucking Jenga tower in this ocean of Jenga towers. It's like, do your thing.
Another analogy that I like to talk about is you go through this progression. If you guys are familiar with this thing called music, there's this style called staccato. And I was realizing once while I was playing the guitar and fingering something that staccato is just one very, you could say, unnuanced way of playing on strings. Okay. And you're picking certain notes and they have their own resonance on that note, and it's separated from the next one, right? And then just imagine, as the hundreds of years as music develops, that's not always going to be a very good sound that you're hearing. But if you're told that that's what music is, and it's one note at a time, and there isn't any kind of like legato between it, there isn't any kind of like sliding between the different ones. Think of how stunted music would be if you were told that like staying within this realm and this resonance is all you'll ever find. And that like to your own ears, you can know that something just like vibrationally doesn't sound good to you. And so I like just the the development of music and the development of like adding different backbeats and adding different full sounds to the music is the way that I treat life. Is that the religion that gave me this very staccato version of life, that you are safe, that you can stay within these things. It's only going to get you so much what's the word I'm looking for? It's only going to get you so much of your hips bouncing. I don't know how to put it. Until you're able to play in those nuanced spaces and actually, am I making sense here?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And like, if you're a musician, you understand that like you have to be able to develop your own sound and develop what actually resonates with you. And if it's just something that's been given to you and it's stuck within like a very stylized one set of how music is supposed to be, you'll drive yourself crazy. And so developing in those spaces of nuance, sliding between notes, you don't need to stay on all of them. You're able to just play with the chords and play with the music that God has given us.
Exactly.
Ta-da.
Bingo. And what's kind of like every genre of music that is, been created, it basically said to everything else that already existed, yeah, that's really cool, but watch this.
Right.
And it's like, what if you looked at like the person you are today? It was like, yeah, that's really cool, but watch this. And then go do something totally outside your genre. There's a few points I think would be useful to really drive home why it's hard. Because as people start doing shadow work, it really is a challenging thing to do. It's not like I tell people, it's not, the fun therapy. Oh, that's fine. Let's go for it. Shadow work. I'm like, you didn't hear me. This is going to be really like exploring parts of you. So for example, I said that you don't like to explore your shadow. Like we're not wired to want to explore the shadow. And so if I was to, so like whoever's listening to this, what if I told you are so similar to Frollo? You are so similar. Your brain immediately is like, yeah, fuck you, Kyle. I am not like that in any way, shape, or form. And it's like, don't be so sure. Don't be so sure that there's not a lot of fucked up things inside of you because of all the pain that you've gone through that is still residually hanging out down there. And in your car that you're driving, there's a whole lot of steering wheels that need to be integrated into one. There's lots of ways that this manifests itself. Self-sabotage is a big one. Or like not like knowing that you want to do something, but for some reason you can't put your finger on the reason why. Why can't I get myself to go do this thing? It's like, why can't I just wear a tank top? Why is the bikini so hard for me? Why is putting on a bikini existential?
Why is it hard for you, Kyle?
When I put on my bikinis, it's not. I've mastered the shadow. There is nothing.
You should have started with that,
so
that people know that you are expert.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's fun. Oh, you know what? Because you brought that up, there's a really funny thing. So one of the things that I talk about with people is how to get them to stop wearing garments because they no longer believe the church is true. And you'd think they would be just elated to not wear garments anymore. But then like days pass and they're like, yeah, like for some reason I just, haven't taken them off. I had
a really hard time taking mine off.
Yeah.
So they're still in the drawer, aren't they?
It's interesting.
Role play nights are wild.
I will wear them. The teachings of the church about their body and their sexuality are so serious and it's such a big deal, which is why it's hard to take them off. Yep. And so being able to approach underwear, which seems like to anyone who's not Mormon, this is the most silly thing you ever heard, that people would have a hard time with this, but it's like, maybe because it's such a serious thing, the way that we approach you, maybe the thing that will get your brain to be okay with, getting rid of the garments and trying something else is like when you were a kid and you had like your rocket ship undies and they were the coolest damn thing in the world. It's hard to take yourself and this issue all that seriously when you're in your fucking 30s and you go to the store and buy rocket ship undies as your bridge to taking off the garments because I can't wear lingerie. That's too much. I can't wear, it's like, maybe I don't think that I'm, that attractive. And so like thongs and sexy lace bikinis or bras are out. It's like maybe a stepstone is to just wear something funny. So instead of feeling all awkward about it all day, you're like, I am wearing fucking rocket ship undies today. And that helps people to be able to make that transition. So little silly things.
Do they make Spice Girls underwear?
They've got to, and if they don't, business venture.
Somebody will send them to me.
Yeah.
Give you my P.O. box.
Yeah.
No, I won't return them. That's not the business I'm in.
Everything has a price, Kara. Anything in this world.
I'll do anything for Adderall.
Can be, Adderall, yeah.
Anyway, cutting all that out.
Yeah. So it can be really challenging and hard to see the shadow in yourself. But when you zoom out and look at the world and look at how the shadow impacts entire nations, that can be a different way to kind of allow yourself to realize, okay, like I have a shadow. So a lot of people, like World War II is one of the most interesting case studies in persuasion and getting people to do terrible things. And there's a lot of books that are written on this. One of them is called Ordinary Men that I read. And it's one of the most chilling books you can read. And while it's not overly explicit, it basically goes into these men so obviously, if you have kids in the Hitler Youth, from a young age being indoctrinated by all this, into the Nazi Party and all that, they had all of that influence. That's not a good group to study because it's not going to tell you if ordinary people would do that.
Mm-hmm.
But there were other people pulling from different countries who didn't have any of that influence, who didn't have any of that. And it analyzes what they did, and they basically were like everybody else, which is scary, right? Because it's like, how easy is it to get somebody to commit murder? Now, here's an interesting thing, and a little bit of homework if people want to do this. It's not really homework because it's really fun. On Netflix, there is a show called The Push. The whole thing is orchestrated. You're going to have random people. You're going to try to get them within one evening to commit murder. It is so fucking fascinating. It is wild. And I'm not even going to spoil it, but if you like...
Is it funny?
It's really not. It is so eye-opening because can you just take random people off the street and then orchestrate something? Like they have this whole process with all these psychological tests and things to make it happen, to get them to comply to something small and easy.
Right.
And then all the way up to the point where it's called the push because the person has to push someone off of a roof. And because you can't fuck with that. You can't say, oh, they didn't really mean it. Like, they held up the gun, but were they going to shoot? They had to physically use their strength to push someone off the roof.
Holy crap.
It is so interesting. And it's really going to fuck with you because if you like the naive, I would never do something like that. People who do evil things are nothing like me. I could never be one of them. It's like, you remember on the Titanic, right before it sank, how people were playing pool with each other and they were best friends and they had been lifelong friends. And then as soon as they hit the water, they're pushing each other under the water in order to save themselves. That's a really hard thing for the psyche to grapple with. And it's easy to come up with a reason why they were fucked up and to not see the fuck uppery inside of yourself.
Yeah. So also never Mormons and atheists who are really mean and I would have figured out the church wasn't true the second that I was told about it as a child. They're would you have?
Yeah.
And they make fun of you for being, I was what part of taking responsibility for being raised in a cult was I supposed to figure out?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because you look at all the Germans, in just pre-1945 who were in that mess, and who were complicitly taking naked pregnant women into a field and shooting them in the back of the head. It's that's a lot. That's really a lot. And it's so easy to, try to find a way that man, Germans are something else. It's wrong. So wrong. Could not be more wrong. It's you think that Hitler got all these people to comply because he was a really good speaker. That's what it was.
You sell a story hard enough and you intertwine some things about manifest destiny in a way of this is our destiny from God. You can do a lot of heinous shit if you say that God told me to do this. He's on my side. Are you against God?
Yeah. So it's so the question is was the reason why all those people were convinced to do that because of external things? Hitler being a good speaker, it was just so hard at the time. You would be thrown in jail and your family. Yeah, exactly. Or is it because the darkness of human beings is just beneath the surface and is so easily accessible? Your ego is probably screaming right now, but here's the really uncomfortable truth. If you cannot see yourself as a guard at Auschwitz and even deriving maybe a little bit of pleasure from what you're doing, you don't understand shit about what you're capable of. Now, the next question is, Kyle, why the hell would we want to explore this? And I'll answer that question with another. How much time do you spend each day trying to solve problems you don't believe exist inside of yourself? The answer is 0 seconds. Most people just assume I'm not capable of that. And so there's no testing the waters to see what you're capable of.
Interesting.
Because it's like, what if you were the person who hit that cold, cold water and you're going to drown in the Titanic? It's like these people weren't thinking. They just involuntarily, started doing this thing because your brain is so wired to survive that it would do anything. And so it's realizing, like, shadow work is basically realizing that you aren't just the hero of your story, you're also the villain of another.
So you're saying if I do enough shadow work, if there's like a second, third world war that I have to be a guard, I'll be like, not today, Hitler too.
It means
I'll walk right back to my YouTube channel.
Good question. That really is the question of why you would, go into this aspect of shadow work. It's that it at least opens the door to you not being one of those people. Because when you statistically look at how many people went with the Germans and who didn't, everyone wants to be the 3 people that didn't. I would never have done it. It's like, you're not. Carl Jung quote time. I just yelled. That probably.
That's fine. Oh, before your Carl Jung quote, are you saying that those 3 people probably did a lot of good shadow work?
Probably.
All I'm saying.
That's a good question. Let me think about that. I don't want to just throw a yep, because that's what my mind wants me to say, so I look good on the interwebs.
Because I'm thinking that what was I gonna say?
So maybe it's not necessarily beneficial to just assume that you would have been the guard at Auschwitz, shooting people, because maybe you weren't going to be one of those people. But doing shadow work opens you exactly. Shadow work opens you up to the possibility where you can work on those things. Oh, and there's a quote that explains that as well.
Only you had a quote to explain this.
Oh, here it is. It's the same one I was about to go to. Okay. Carl Jung, wisdom.
Lay it on me.
Okay. Unfortunately, there can be no doubt that man is, on the whole, less good than he imagines himself or wants to be. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, meaning you fished it out, the blacker and denser it is. If an inferiority is conscious, one always has a chance to correct it. Furthermore, it is constantly in contact with other interests, so that it is continually subjected to modifications. But if it is repressed and isolated from consciousness, it never gets corrected. Bingo.
Summary right there.
Yep, that's basically why you do shadow work. So anyway, that's a lot for for people to. That's not going to be like, yep, okay, I'm on board with that. Like, the psyche needs time to kind of digest that one and realize, like, whoa, like, it's nice to imagine yourself just as default. I'm the white knight in all of the stories. It's like all the people who did, the villain things probably also thought the exact same. And then all of a sudden that day comes along and the circumstances are just right and you snap.
Yeah. And to bring things back to like your Hunchback of Notre Dame point, I think especially in the religion that we come from, at least the way that my psyche worked is that, yes, I'm part of the chosen generation. I'm sent here at a certain time with a certain mantle upon my shoulders to have like the gathering of Israel in these last days. And I've been baptized and I made covenants and the Holy Spirit dwells within me. And so because I do all of the right things, I don't really have a shadow side other than like the natural man who wants to pull me down. But as long as I am obeying the word of wisdom and not looking at porn, no R-rated movies, and covering my shoulders, and I'm checking all these boxes, I don't even need to worry that there's something deeper, a hidden, more shadow side of a subconscious. Because if there was a World War III popping up tomorrow, I know that who's on the Lord's side? Who? Me. Like, you don't even have to like entertain those thoughts because you are just part of this chosen few that's in the right gospel. But when that all goes away, and I know that's like part of the existential crisis that a lot of people have is like, well, now who is my identity in the world before a creator, if there is one? And am I a good person? And by what metric do I decide if I'm a good person? And so I think the benefit of going into shadow work, as I understand it, is knowing that all of that hogwash about like, because you have the spirit that makes you chosen, that makes you a better person than other people, that you don't do bad things. But when you're actually able to like look at all of the Jenga pieces, take them out for what they are, and actually decide what you want to keep and what you want to take. And it has nothing to do with this magical thinking from this religion. It's an honest assessment of like what's been buried in your subconscious. And it's, you can look at those things without judgment, but you actually have to look at them.
Love that. Dope. Cara Burrell.
Adderall free.
Boom.
It's over for you, church. When I get medicated, it's all over for you guys.
Yeah. So, okay, there's a few more quotes from Carl Jung that I think kind of summarize some of the points we've been talking about, particularly about why it's difficult. So one of them is there's no coming to consciousness without pain. Like it is going to be a painful thing for you to explore your shadow, but at least it opens the door to you being able to look at your real self and being able to, like, your whole self, the parts of you that you felt ashamed about, or that you felt, oh, I can't, be that kind of a person. I'm not allowed to be gay, or I'm not allowed to be, like a lot of people who leave the church all of a sudden swing very left, and they've come from a very right. Like I was a conservative Christian Republican for my whole life. And then all of a sudden, it's like, not only did I lose like the religious ideology and that version of myself, but I also lost the political one. Because as soon as the religion wasn't true, I saw how much of my political beliefs were exactly because the church had influenced me to believe one way. You look at the evidence, you look at philosophy, you look at other ways
of interpret everything
thinking
through a lens where you already be like, I already know that my leaders are on this political side, so I'm obviously going to start here and view everything. Yeah,
it's like looking at the moon through a microscope and then switching it for a telescope lens. It's just like, holy fuck. Like I did not understand anything. And so that's
critical thinking helps a lot.
And it hurts. It really hurts.
Yeah.
Anyone who's deconstructed, it's like, yeah, this is so much fun, right? Wrong. It is a harrowing, challenging thing, but there's really cool little bits of joy. And like I love it when people accomplish, like I wore a tank top today and they're so happy about it. I'm just like, God, that is the best thing I've ever heard. Like, I'm so happy for you, because to them, that was such a big thing, because it's them taking themselves back. It's like realizing that the person that they've been their whole life is the version of themselves they had to become in order to win the Mormon, Catholic, Islamic game. And then being like, fuck that. I'm an individual. I'm going to rock my own shit. And I'm going to give myself permission to fuck it up. I'm just going to go and explore. And there's going to be lots of, weird, awkward phases, like someone ordering coffee for the first time. Like, yeah, I'd like a coffee, please. Like, what the fuck does that mean? It's like, you might be awkward standing at a Starbucks being like, I'd like a coffee. Like,
I'm
then
an
you
autonomous
learn.
individual ordering a coffee, and that's all I've gotten. That's as far as I've gotten on that.
Yeah.
I haven't understood what espresso or cappuccino, I don't know the lingo. But
espresso just means they make it fast. It's an espresso.
Yeah, I'll make sure to take that to Starbucks.
Yeah. Like an espresso. Yeah. The lingo. You'll figure it out when you leave, It's cool.
It's not what this video is about. If you want coffee ordering techniques, that comes after the shadow work.
Exactly.
You can't skip this part.
That's the benefit at the end. Like, you can order coffee like a champ. Yeah. So shadow work, ladies and gentlemen. Another quote, a quickie. We love quickies. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. So you have to first accept that these parts, these voices, these shadow fragments screaming like, hey, I'm down here. You have to be like, all right, you're there. Because until you do that, until you acknowledge the existence of these other parts of yourself, you will never work on it. You will never go down and unlock the door and go in there and be like, hey, I'm so sorry I kept you in here for so long. You really are beautiful. You really are wonderful. I'm sorry. And then you reintegrate that part into you.
So Kyle, you've gone through a lot of shadow work. Can you give us an instance where you have found fragments of your shadow self?
I sure can. And I have a few stories I wanted to relate that clients have told me to, because I hear the most fascinating stories of people when we talk about shadow work, and then I let them loose, and what they come back with the next week about parts of themselves they discovered. So fascinating. So let's do me first. So once upon a time, this is actually the night I became an atheist. I woke up at like 3 a.m. and my brain was just running. And it was the first time in my life where my mind, not me, but my mind, like there's those are two separate things. My mind was finally arguing in the debate that was going on in my head for the atheist side. Because I hadn't allowed myself to be like, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. All these contrary points of view, things that I'm thinking in Sunday school, but I never would raise my hand and actually say, because then I wouldn't get the love and the approval and the praise. And I'm labeled, oh, that guy's dangerous. Don't talk to him. Like,
when I first accepted that, when I first became an atheist and I accepted that voice was there that whole time and it was like a dark, shadowy friend, I literally was like crying and I was listening to a song and I was reinterpreting the lyrics of the song. And I literally was just like, you've been there all along, my friend. I've ignored you. I haven't answered your calls. I'll never forget you anymore.
sorry.
My critical thinking was all just like yapping away in the background. I was like, shh, shh, shh. I need this to survive. Go away.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we hugged.
beautiful. Well, because the narrative of virtually every religion is chase the light, chase the light, chase the light, avoid the darkness, don't even touch the darkness.
Sure.
But there's so much of the darkness, like the fun, the
You can learn from.
mischievous. Yeah, that's a part of you. It's like, who wants to have sex with an angel? No, thank you. Like,
A lot of people do.
only if they haven't done shadow work.
Have you not seen Victoria's Secret's fashion shows, Kyle?
I
want to have sex with an angel.
I would never watch such filth, Cara Burrell.
I watch it for the musical performances.
Exactly. So I became an atheist in a hotel in Banff, Canada on a ski trip. It was me, a good friend of mine, and one of her friends. And we had just gotten done with like a long day of skiing. It was amazing. And we're in the hot tub and I decided to play some music. So I just put it on shuffle and put it down. And we're listening to the tunes. I'm enjoying it. And the song, Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer.
Kiss me.
Bingo. It's so great. I'm just going to like reference songs and just like go. Exactly. So that song came on. And I was just kind of like, yeah, cool. Like, not really thinking about it. It's just background music. And then my friend had invited to come with us, she looks at me and she's like, this is not hot tubbing music. And then she picks up my phone, she pauses it, she puts it down, picks up her phone and starts playing music. And I was like, that was really abrasive and like, what? Like, that was weird. And like, I didn't want to like make a big deal of it. And I didn't want to admit that like, okay, my feelings got a little bit hurt because you didn't like the music that I played. But it's like, I'm a man. I don't feel anything. Like, I'm fucking
I would have filled that hot tub with my fucking tears.
Yeah, it was like it was rude. It was like a little bit cutting, but I didn't want to like make a big deal out of it. And so I just in my head I was like, okay, I'm just gonna deal with this by just saying, okay, she's human. She did something rude. It's okay. You're okay. Don't worry about it. And then I had, in my brain I had kind of like check mark, dealt with, log that away. Fast forward like 2 months later.
Fast forward, her playlist is Hillary Duff.
Exactly. Fast forward like 2 months later, I'm at a party and my friend is cranking up the tunes and he hits shuffle and guess what song comes out?
Sixpence None the Richer.
Bingo. So that
Party
song comes
jam.
out.
Kiss me.
Yeah.
Under the family starlight.
So maybe it's true. I just have friends who like shitty music and all the music I like is shitty. I don't know. I'm open to that. But what was more interesting than whether or not I like shitty music is that when that song played, immediately my brain, for no reason that was apparent to me, I got mad at my friend. I was like, why would you play this song? Now, I have no beef with that song. I like that song. But what had happened was because my brain had subconsciously, without me knowing, attributed that song with the pain of what happened. That song happened to be playing when my friend's friend had kind of come after me about the music. And it was a little landmine that was placed in my brain. So next time I heard it, boom, it went right there and exploded because I was experiencing exactly the same emotions that I had when I was there. And I got mad at my friend because he was responsible for it. That's an example of a shadow
Exactly
fragment.
how I feel about men with backwards baseball caps. I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the last one that I saw in that one.
Exactly. Fuck those guys.
Yeah, Carl's the good one.
All right.
Okay, continue.
I'm fighting the system. So that's an example. And so I had to like go into that because you have all these painful experiences in your life and you think, okay, well, like I moved on from it, I resolved. And one of the hardest questions that you can ask yourself that pertains to shadow work is, have you really healed from that? Or have you gotten really good at not thinking about it? And it's like, oh, fuck. Ouch. Ooh.
I still don't know the answer to that.
Like, thanks,
and a lot
Kyle.
of stuff I've thought about.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I don't know the answer. It's $1 million question.
Yeah, and it's hard because there is a point where it's like, okay, you've dealt with this in every way that you can. And, it's like, hope it worked. But there's some things that don't completely fade. Losing a loved one, it's like maybe that will always be there. And so maybe it's not so much that like when I think about this thing, I never have pain anymore. But maybe a better way to define a win in that experience is that it's not ruining your life. It's not running the show anymore.
Yeah.
And that's cool because like that's when I think you can mark it as healed, even if it's not completely gone from your psyche. Because how is it going to be gone? Like watching your friend die in a war, like, oh yeah, eventually you'll just totally forget that happened. Like, what? No. And, you know, through therapy, through exploring that, allowing yourself to feel those feelings as painful as they are, it helps. And it might not be like the perfect thing and life is exactly the way it was before that experience happened, whatever it was that happened to you. And I'm sure there's a lot of things. You're able to.
I'm sure you're
move
fucked
forward.
up.
Yeah,
You're watching this.
Yeah. This
Love. That's a joke. If you're here, you're one of the good ones who doesn't even do any work on yourself. You're so sweet and precious. I love you so much.
Also false. Shadow work. So anyway, okay. So one of my clients had a mom that whenever she would bear her testimony, she would fake cry. And she knew her mom's real cry from her fake cry, but other people couldn't figure it out. And so she never allowed herself to cry ever because she thought that she would be interpreted the way she interprets her mom crying.
Ooh.
Like mind fuck.
Like,
and that's something that came up in one of the sessions when we were just kind of exploring the shadow together and in a conversation. She's like, oh, wow. And what's funny is I had another client who their mom would always compliment them when they were in big groups of Relief Society people. My son is so amazing because he does this and this and this, and would just, boast. But he would never receive a compliment unless she was in front of her people that she wanted to impress.
Ugh,
and so every single time he was complimented ever in any situation, it felt awkward, and it meant you don't mean it. You're just trying, it didn't make sense, because I mean, these are different people giving you compliments. You don't have, it's not, there's no real good reason to assume that everybody is only complimenting you for the same reason that your mom did. But that tainted all the times you get, somebody giving you a compliment. And I haven't realized stuff about this about myself, and my clients have had the same experience where it's like, wow, you just start realizing like, maybe I am doing this because of this thing that happened. Or it's like, why is it that I really hate this thing? Things that you hate, certain groups, certain labels that you hate are really good examples of the little hints of where your shadow fragments lie. Like, for example, if I thought I silenced you, Mom. So just kidding. It was a hot girl. Yeah, exactly. So that was so deadpan. Like I lost it, and you were just like straight faced in that joke. That was phenomenal.
Especially because is your mom not a hot girl?
So shadow work. Just gonna suppress that immediately. Why
don't you want to explore that with me, Kyle? Hot girl calling you.
My mom is an attractive person, and I can acknowledge that because I've done shadow work.
Yeah. My mom is the hottest 70-year-old. My mom's in the top 5% of hottest 70-year-olds, I think.
So it's funny you bring that up because my mom was like hottest mom 3 years in a row at Scout Camp. There was the rating. Voted? Yeah, there was a thing.
Show me a pic after this.
Yeah, I will, and you'll agree. My mom is a very beautiful person, and so it's always uncomfortable. One time I was working at the Costco food court, and my boss sees my mom walking in, not knowing it's my mom, and he's like, "God, I would." And then he went off, and I was like, "That's my mom."
Is this shadow work that we're doing right now?
It's probably more shadow work.
How do you feel about your mom's tits? Why don't you want to explore that, Kyle?
Shadow work's good. Do it. It's so good for you. So, I think we've basically hit all the bases that we wanted to today. Oh, okay. The final question that you were asking me earlier.
All right. So to wrap up, if people don't do shadow work, what happens?
Okay. So, most people are not even aware of their need to conform. They live under the illusion that they follow their own ideas and inclinations, that they are individualists, that they have arrived at their opinions as the result of their own thinking, and that it just so happens that their ideas are the same as those of the majority. Eric Fromm. Really good quote. So basically, shadow work allows you to step outside the framework that you've been indoctrinated with. That's just your norm, that you've always assumed, yeah, that's true because everybody else around me thinks it's true. And it allows you, instead of like putting a period at the end of that sentence, to put a question mark. And then it's open again for research and new points of view, which is always a good thing. Shadow work allows you to do that. Next quote, Samuel Johnson. Almost every man wastes part of his life in attempts to display qualities which he does not possess and to gain applause which he cannot keep. And I think that that's really something that most people who've deconstructed fundamentalist religions can realize, because there's parts of you that weren't allowed to come out, and there were certain things that you had to do that you wouldn't really have done otherwise. It's like at BYU when somebody was like, yeah, I watch Game of Thrones, but don't worry, I watch it edited. It's like, wow, like begging for my approval, begging for me to say, oh, you're a good spiritual person, so we can be friends. Because had you said you didn't, watch Game of Thrones, the edited version, I would have, just set you on fire and sent you to meet Jesus, because clearly he hasn't found you.
When I think of that quote, it just makes me think of the structure of Mormonism of, you're reading your scriptures and that you're able to have certain spiritual gifts be exemplified with following the rules and with being in tune with the spirit, and that your life is always just kind of an attempt to live out a way that everyone will see the church is true, with like your Christ-like service and like a man giving a blessing, that you're trying to display qualities of a Christ-like person, part of the true church, in all of these, service-oriented ways, because I do all of these things. But that's not really true to who I think any of us are, because it's all just kind of a facade to put on to always make it look like the church is always still true. No matter what the blessing that you gave ends up being, the church is always still true. And you can never actually keep any of those like magical powers that you think that you can possess, that you can like garner and what's the word? Those magic powers that you can kind of collect and be able to like bless the world with, because they're all just kind of like magical thinking, flip of a coin. We do our best with what we can. There's not anything like actually beaming down from heaven that makes your blessing any more special, your home really any more special. Like the spirit residing there is all just kind of a made up facade.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
So you're not allowed to be a person. You're only allowed to be a billboard for Jesus and Mormonism.
Exactly.
And so it's like, you're not allowed to have bad days. You're not allowed to choose the wrong. You're not allowed to, fuck it up.
And I want that for them. I want that for Mormons. I want them to be able to be authentic, that like the happy families are in and out of the church everywhere. Like people are just normal and we have our good days and our bad days. You don't need to be a billboard for the church, that your marriage has to stay together no matter what. And you have to have a lot of kids, and you have to like make sure that the blessing you say on the sick person's head has all the right words to unlock the certain formula to make sure Jesus gives them their cancer healed.
And it's like, why would you want to cater your life to an audience that is so superficial and whose love is so conditional? It's like one of the things that I learned is that if all you have to offer is conditional love, you are replaceable. And so it's like, what if all the closest people in your life really would just abandon you because you wore a bikini, or because now you drink coffee, or they would treat you differently? Why? With all the wonderful people who would not bat an eyelash at this silly stuff and would love you, and who are deep down craving to find somebody who is just like you because you're very similar to them. It's like, why would you not, why would you keep putting out false symbols of who you are, so that those people who would love the real you, would you just, were you to just show it to them, would come and love you? But instead you keep pandering to this audience of these superficial, I can't believe you drink coffee, and I just wanted to tell you that. My friend was at a dinner after his mission, and the dad, like, because he had grown out a beard, and went off on him in front of the whole family as a guest in their home. Like, the brethren have said you do not grow a beard. You do not have facial hair. And like, how dare you? Just like lit him up. Yeah. And he, he's just like, I'm sorry. He's like, what do? It's like this fragile kid who's back from a mission, who's being just destroyed because he has facial hair. It's like, last time I checked, there's not a picture of Jesus that's clean shaven and that doesn't have blue eyes.
Loner. That's what you do. You walk up to that person and you say, loser, loner, snap, put together. Wait, you walk up to that person and you say, loser, loner, snap, put together, whatever, total McDonald's worker. Not to disparage the working class, but that's what we used to say in elementary school.
That's a fancier version than mine. Mine was loser, loser, double loser, as if whatever, get the picture, duh. It's cooler. I'm going to say it. I'm just going to come out and say it. And you also get to commit violence.
You also get to commit violence,
Yeah.
and mine disparages the working class. I picked this.
Perfect. Love it. Okay. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Love that all day, all night long. So it's so funny because like the word absurd jumps off the page because like look at what we looked like in the temple. Like
look what we looked like in the temple. Are you talking about a robe that I had to move shoulder to shoulder and a veil and
the throat
a baker
slitting,
hat
which we didn't have to do.
And
God changed his mind about that part.
Yeah. God's like, on second thought, you know what? Just don't do it again. I was gonna kill you, but just you could just try your best.
God was totally different when he stopped drinking. He's like, no more like bashing the babies with rocks. No, it was bashing the rocks with babies, actually, is how the Old Testament says it. So it's like,
I thought it was dashing the babies against rocks.
Yeah, so it's not throwing a rock at a baby. You actually pick up the baby and throw it at the rock, which I'm like, wow, God, that is like...
Can I quote Taylor Tomlinson's joke on that?
Please.
The Old Testament is my favorite Taylor Swift album. You don't see God of the Bible rehashing his old shit, and the people who own it now suck. Anyway, she has a great joke about that.
That's really good. I haven't heard that. It hasn't come through my Facebook.
You have
snippets.
to watch on Netflix. Watch her newest special. She has a lot of Christian deconstruction jokes that are the best.
I love humor that is around deconstruction. Well, obviously,
Taylor Swift. She's like, of course I'm a girl in her mid-20s. Of course I'm going to compare T Swift to the Lord. It was like, my demographic, please, thank you. I'm listening. All ears, Taylor. All Taylors I worship. Okay,
that's awesome. So yeah, the absurd things and like the amount of ourselves that we were willing to suppress and deny exist so that we could stay in this thing that just made us quietly miserable, just like silently suffering through this, the whole Mormon experience. That was awful. And it's like, when you finally admit that it's awful, you can finally start changing. But if you're like, I really like going to the temple, even as a member, I was like, this is the stupidest thing ever.
Waste of my time.
I thought that we were going to have to like kill a sheep when I went into the temple. And that was my expectation. I was like, I'll kill it. Like, I will do it.
That would have got my heart racing instead of falling asleep.
Yeah. Here, watch this movie. It's like, you can't watch the same damn movie with, minimal differences between which version you get and do that all the time. It's like, that was so stupid. So stupid. What a waste of time. I can't, there's so much to talk about with shadow work that if I don't have like, okay, we just have to talk about these things and the next time we'll add to it.
What are we going to talk about next time?
Maybe we'll get into more specifics.
Your dad?
There's so many examples of shadow work that like when people look at, I guess we can find, we'll end with one more. What American troops did in Vietnam. Because it's easy to look at the Germans like, well, they're Germans. We don't know about them. Like, who knows? American soldiers get to Vietnam. The way you got home was body count. And so we went into villages, just took American boys, put them there, and then sent them into villages where they killed hundreds and thousands of men, women, and children indiscriminately, because then you got to go, you got to be off the line and you got to go home, because that's how we were going to end the war, was body count. And American boys were put there, and then they did it. They fell in line, and that's absolutely insane that happened. But it makes perfect sense that it did, given what we learn about our own shadows and what we're capable of. So today was definitely the heavier portion of shadow work. Next
Lots
time,
of reference to genocide in this one.
Yeah,
heavy on the genocide.
Yeah,
sorry, guys.
So if you don't admit that it could be you, you'll never mitigate the likelihood.
Hopefully you're a world leader watching this.
Yeah.
And you could do something to mitigate any future genocides.
Yeah.
Leave us a comment below if you are any. Leave us a comment if you are thinking of genocide, and we'll DM you.
Yeah. I'll do a free session with you, shadow work.
That'd be so funny if God messaged and he's like, I've been thinking about bringing back the old stuff again.
He's like, I've been
from
drinking.
last week when I just flooded Afghanistan. I've been really itching for some more genocide. Just kidding.
Yeah.
All right, Kyle, if people are like, this is so awesome. And I want to hear you talk more about this stuff and maybe help me with some of my personal problems. Where can people find you?
So people can book a session with me on my website, beyondgodandreligion.com. If you want to reach out on Facebook, Instagram, I was on TikTok, but I have been banned, as we talked about. So Beyond God and Religion 2.0, you can send me a message there. Basically, you can just message me and I'll see it. So yeah, pick your spot. But yeah,
Kyle's
the
awesome.
website is a good spot.
He's not convinced yet. Kyle's a good dad.
Shucks, you're feeding my shadow.
You know, you'll talk to him on the phone and you'll absolutely be convinced if this YouTube video didn't do enough. Hopefully this YouTube video did everything just to help introduce more of the ideas of shadow work, which I think are awesome and complex. My sister has been an ex-Mormon for a very long time. She said this is her favorite video and subject, and she like never watches my stuff. And she's like, more shadow work, idiot little sister. Do something for me for once. It's good. Hopefully this video was a good resource for everyone watching. Thanks so much. You know that we have big powers that be, and it's difficult as a girl, you know, sometimes to make a living trying to do content as I do. But if you would be so kind to subscribe to my Patreon, I also have a donor box, and that just, you know, reoccurring stuff, just kind of like a subscriber to the channel, and just a couple of dollars here and there help keep those transitioning lights on. And I have my TikTok and my Instagram and Twitter and all of the places, and all the links are down below in my description. So thanks so much for everyone who supports this channel. You guys mean the world to me. I love, love, love all of the comments. I try to read as many of them as I can. And I hope to have more discussions like this. If you like this and you want us to continue, we'll make another part. If you want us to shut up, we'll continue to make another part. And if you have any other guests you'd like to see on my YouTube channel, any other subjects you want me to cover, hopefully I will do them all given enough time and enough shadow work. So thanks for joining me today, Kyle.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. If you want to see me keep making long-form YouTube videos on Mormon topics from deconstruction to Mormon history, please consider helping make my channel sustainable by heading to DonorBox for a one-time or reoccurring donation, or Patreon or Venmo. Like and subscribe, and hit me up on Instagram if there's a topic you'd like me to cover next, and I promise to keep rolling out awesome content weekly. If you want me to go away, do nothing.